Over the last couple of weeks, I've had a few test runs to see what's involved in making a different type of travel video series for YouTube using an iPhone and a Dashcam. And wow, so many hassles. Well, at least 13 of them. So hang around and find out if 13 is unlucky for me or not. Well, it seemed that every time I solved one problem, another obstacle popped up. I was beginning to wonder whether someone wanted to tell me something. Hi, I'm Stephen Spry, and I want to tell you that the whole point of having a test run when trying out a new concept is to make mistakes, and then hopefully you'll be able to learn from them. You'll work out what gear you need to have, and you'll work out what to do and how to do it. And of course, since I'm on YouTube, to share some of the lessons I learnt so that you don't have to go through the same agonising experiences. Now, my first weekend shoot was spent driving through some nearby forests for 2 complete days, visiting some pretty spectacular places. And here's what I discovered. Problem number 1, and it might be obvious, but it's definitely worth including at number 1, and that pre-planning is vital. You just can't wing it. You know, you've got to work out where you're going and the stops you need to make along the way in advance. And of course, have a plan B in case of bad weather. So using Google Maps, I checked out the distances and the destinations, etc. And in my case, I also checked any relevant local websites to see what info they had. Or more precisely, what they did not have. And with all the planning done, fingers crossed that on the day it doesn't rain on your parade, which of course it did. So we left about 2 hours later, changed the direction of the loop previously planned, so went the other way, and now discovered that the sun was our enemy, especially in midwinter when it's lower on the horizon. Solution? Well, the route and the shoot has to be planned in advance as much as possible, mainly to avoid driving and shooting into direct sunlight. It's not always possible, but it is doable. Now, problem number 2. I want to show off a lot of the countryside that you can only access using 2-wheel drive dirt roads, but not the 4-wheel drive stuff, as normal people can't access them, and there are already thousands of 4-wheel drive videos around. But dirt roads, are a shocker for camera shake. And at the time, both the cameras that I had were mounted on these dodgy plastic things with a suction cap that attaches them to the windscreen. Like that. Forget it. The vibration, because of the length here, is a killer. They just wobble far too much. And no matter what resolution you film in, there's no way that you could put up with watching that. It would just drive you insane. So the solution is, inside the car, the phone camera needs a solid mount. It needs something like this little fella, a small rig super clamp mount with ball head mount hot shoe adapter and cool clamp. That's its official name. This is attached to the sun visor, all right, up here to part of the sun visor, and when it's firmly attached there and the little holder that holds the phone is down here, it's not going anywhere. It's unlike this plastic stuff that just wobbles all over the place. This is sitting up there on a nice firm mounting point and doesn't go anywhere. This is solid. It doesn't move at all, as opposed to those things which wobble all over the place. I also decided that I needed a better dashcam. One with a wider lens angle that can be mounted more firmly onto the windscreen. Solution? I purchased a Uniden iGo Cam 60 with a 150 degree lens, GPS recording, and a much better resolution because it has a 2K resolution, so much better than the cheapie that I already had. And I got a monster SD card to record the trip footage. Can you see a potential problem looming here? Oh dear. Phone cameras they're just not ideal for recording handheld movies. And these huge mitts always seem to be in the way, especially on some of the good shots. So, maybe you've heard that when you're taking movies that you need to have 3 points of contact with your camera. Now, this is an old Fuji that I don't use all that often. But basically, for demonstration purposes, one hand goes here, the other hand goes here, and then you lock your arms in so that now it doesn't move. Everything is rigid, and you've formed a tripod out of your arms and your body. So pretend this is a mobile phone, which it isn't, but we can pretend, can't we? Because the phone's up here being used. Normally, you're taking photos like this, aren't you? One-handed, or maybe two. And you see what happens with two. The fingers get in the way. I know, klutz. So, a better solution for me was to get a gimbal. In fact, a DJI Osmo 2 gimbal. And there it is with our pretend phone. See, it certainly fixes the shaky problem and it keeps the fingers out of the way of the lens, and it should make the whole viewing experience for my visitors a lot more professional. Woohoo! Problem solved. But, of course, a month later, DJI has just released the cheaper and possibly slightly better Osmo Mobile 3. Oh well. Since my daughter now wants a gimbal for Christmas, she might just get one. Just got to decide which one she's going to get. Problem 4, you can just miss so much the first time. So the solution to that is you either do better pre-planning or possibly do each trip twice. They're short ones and so on, and that's quite possible. So take lots of notes the first time, then plan it again, so the second trip has more rewarding footage. For example, on our first day out, one of the attractions we wanted to see was Big Nellie. And when we got there, this is what we saw from the lookout. There she is, all the way up there. But we got better views of Big Nellie from the road before.
Yeah, that's right.
Earlier.
Well,
Should have stopped and taken photos
she was
then.
more impressive from there.
She certainly was. If we'd realised that, we would have been a bit cluier, and about 10 minutes earlier up the road on the way to Big Nellie, there were some fantastic shots that actually gave us the sort of scene that you're looking at now. So far, you might think that the first couple of trips I've made on my test runs have been a waste of time, but no, even though I haven't produced any video on those trips yet, it was certainly not a waste of time. I've already learnt so much that's going to make a difference, and I've purchased some better gear, which I hope will also help. And I'm also looking forward to doing both of those trips again, shortly and properly. this time with a much better chance of success. Problem number 5. Well, a gimbal is fun to use, but I discovered that my phone battery dies very quickly. Especially, it seems, when I use the DJI camera app, as opposed to the native iPhone camera app, which I still mainly use at this stage because, I'm a dinosaur and I don't want to learn anything too new at this stage. So anyway, what do you do about that? Well, the solution to keeping a camera charged is to have a portable power bank. And take that with you, put it in your pocket, take that with you when you're filming. 10,000 milliamp hours, pretty cool, it'll last forever. Or, on the back of the gimbal here, there is a USB socket, and you can plug the phone in. Or you can plug your phone into the cigarette lighter socket whenever it's in the car. And this power bank, I can also use this with the Dashcam if I want to go for a walk with it handheld, because I like the idea of the wider angle lens on a bush track, maybe. Or, if you have a phone that can be charged wirelessly, some of these gimbals have that capability built in now, like the Moser Mini Me. I don't. My phone doesn't charge wirelessly. My next one might, and that's in a few months. But that's something to think of as well. Problem number 6. I found that the charging cable, which is meant to go in this end of the camera, is obviously hard to use when the phone's in the gimbal. And similarly, the Rode Video Mic Me L microphone that I use with the iPhone, it also plugs directly into that lightning port as well, and when it's in the gimbal, can only be used poking this way. That means I can only use it with the front camera. And of course, when you put the rabbit or dead cat or whatever it is they call it onto the microphone to help reduce the wind noise, the extra weight makes it almost impossible to balance the gimbal. The solution? Well, grin and bear it, I suppose, by the looks. That it works, sort of. But a dual double lightning splitter adapter like the one shown on the screen might help a little bit here. We've got company. Welcome to Australia. And of course, I just discovered that the newer Osmo Mobile 3, being offset in its design, overcomes that particular issue, along with the Moser Mini Me, as the cable etc. now doesn't get in the way of the motors on the gimbal. So, well. Right, all good? Well, you'd think so. Except now the video resolution question comes into play, because some serious YouTube research suggested that the better the resolution you film in, the better results you will get in post. Now that makes sense. So I adjusted the iPhone settings to 4K and maxed out the Dashcam. Woohoo! Can you see any problems with that? No, I didn't either. Nope. Until after my first official trip out 2 weekends later, I'd used up all the storage on the phone. Oopsies! And there was another 18 gig of Dashcam footage on the SD card. Not bad. Altogether, about 40 gig from almost 1 day. And then, the pièce de résistance, when I opened iMovie to import these huge MOV files. I don't know, average size only a couple of gig each. iMovie looked at me as if to say, "What you talking about, Willis?" So I go and make yet another coffee. And after several minutes, what seemed like hours again, I then tried the basic split clip move. Simple enough, split clip into 2 segments. Well, iMovie looked at me again, and I'm sure it said something like, nah, no, I'm not doing that today. Houston, we've had another problem. My ancient MacBook Pro is, bless its little heart, not going to handle this at all too well. And I tried all sorts of different stuff, and the only thing iMovie would do was protest. And eventually, despite putting 4K in, problem number 8 is that iMovie only wanted to export 720p out. So I was stuck with trying to use these huge 4K files in iMovie, knowing they would only end up in 720p. Solution? Well, all of the solutions that I found online for that particular 720p problem didn't work. I eventually worked it out, and I'll tell you shortly, but it seemed the only solution was to buy a new computer. Well, not bloomin' likely, unless, of course, someone out there is, kind enough to send me several grand. Just pointing it out there, putting it out there in the universe, yep. Well, one solution with the older, lower-powered computer that I do have is to make sure that iMovie is the only program running. But those big files are still a problem. So I used a program I already had to convert all the source files from 4K over to 720p, which is the lowest HD resolution, and hope that iMovie can handle it on my ancient Mac, which it did, by the way. And, well, maybe I can now actually start with some post-production work. So, an update on the 720p issue. Eventually I worked out that one of the pictures, and it was a screenshot that I'd done on the laptop, and I'd imported into the production, was at 720p. And when I used that in the timeline, and it didn't matter where it was in the timeline, guess what? The whole video became 720p. So the solution was to generate the screenshot from the external monitor that I have at 1080p, and then use that picture in the timeline. So at least that problem is now solved, and as far as the 4K to 720p is concerned, I now film on the camera in 1080p, and everything seems to work fine with iMovie. That's wood. So I managed to get some post-production work done, and it all seemed to go okay. And I did some snazzy picture-in-picture stuff in the intro and saved the files, and then discovered the next problem. See, problem number 9 is that iMovie created some huge MOV files, which would take forever and ever to upload to YouTube, especially on my 4G mobile internet connection. And the solution that was easy to fix, eventually, once you work it out, was that in iMovie, when you hit that share file option, use the higher, faster combination to create smaller MP4 files. Now, I'd initially used the best option, of course. Well, isn't that what you do? But that had created these huge .mov files. Problem number 10. Can you imagine my delight when I finally uploaded the video to YouTube, and then it played back at 360p? I mean, what happened to my 720p HD that I'd taken days to solve? Well, simple solution here, people. Wait. It seems YouTube does some further background processing before making the HD version available. Oh, not the problem that I thought I had for a change. Yay! Problem number 11. So, during that production, I noticed that despite all of my pre-planning that I mentioned way back in number 1, that the sun was still a problem. And despite my newer Dashcam and better positioning of it, sunlight was still a major concern. And lots of footage was, for all intents and purposes, basically ruined because a lot of the times we were driving towards the sun. And at this point, I'm almost ready to tear my hair out, which, as you can see, would be a bit of a problem. So the solution to this is to use several selected screenshots that are taken at 1080p, remember, from that footage. So just zip through the footage slowly, pick a scene every 5-10 seconds that doesn't have the glare all over it, maybe when the sun's behind a tree or something like that. Grab a screenshot, grab 30, 40, 50, however many you want of those, and then convert them into a slideshow type movie. Nice. And it actually worked out better than I thought, which is good. And I've used that solution to also deal with really bumpy roads. And it's just like doing a time lapse in post-production, I suppose. Problem 12, and still with the sunlight. And now the reflection off the dash itself back onto the windscreen. It's a total pain in the backside. So, I've since made a little black hood out of cardboard for my dash cam. It's a little black box that prevents most of the sunlight being reflected up off the dash from the side onto the windscreen and back into the camera. So that seems to work okay at solving that problem as long as the base of it goes completely up to the windscreen. And it works a lot better than a dash mat would because clothing, legs, arms, hands, shoes, phones, etc., especially light, anything light coloured, is still reflected back onto the windscreen. So the dash mat down here won't reflect the dash, but somebody sitting a bit further back, if they're wearing light coloured clothing or have their arms on their lap, that's going to be reflected onto the screen. You can avoid half of that problem by making sure that they're wearing darker coloured clothing, as that'll help reduce some of the reflected images, but maybe don't even take a passenger at all. But even then it doesn't matter, because I do remember driving along the road with my hands on the steering wheel, and I'm looking back at the footage later, and I see my hands in the footage on the other side of the car. And I just... Still, even without a passenger, I'm having problems. Oh, well. So continuing in even more editing, and I found some of that 720p stuff I'd converted earlier. It wasn't good. There was too much pixelation in far too many places, and I just wasn't happy about that. So back to editing, slowly, with those huge source files again. Grrr, and grrr, again. But anyway, all of that has actually since been sorted, and my first official trip completed and uploaded. Yay! All 40 minutes of it. But don't go look at it yet, as we only have one more lesson to go. Okay, and I'd hate you to miss this one. On to day 4 of my filming, and this is my second official trip. So the iPhone's now filming at 1080p, and the Dashcam's at a slightly higher resolution. It's 2K with a 21:9 ratio. And I've played with them in iMovie, and it no longer continues to protest too much. Just as long as I have nothing else running at the same time, particularly anything that accesses the network like mail, and that I keep an eye on the activity monitor to see when the memory is starting to clog up, and then I just quit and restart iMovie. And I've also changed my filming technique, despite some expert advice to do otherwise, due to the next problem. And problem number 13. Filming in longer segments results in huge files, which are harder to move and harder to edit, particularly on older computers like mine. And they take up huge amounts of disk space. Solution? Set the Dashcam to a 5-minute maximum loop instead of continuous, and stop the phone camera after every scene. It's just so much easier to move and work with all these smaller files, even though there are lots more of them, and it also helps the iPhone battery last longer. And of course, because you might only use a tiny segment of a scene, that takes up much less storage space in your iMovie library, which can grow to epic proportions. So epic that really an external hard drive is also needed to store these source files and finished project files. What's that? 14? I thought there were only... Oh, okay, so it's a bonus problem, right, good. Well, okay, I just learnt this while doing this video. So I had the camera, the Rode mic, in the gimbal, on a tripod. The motor noise that was picked up by the microphone of those gimbal motors just was enough that the whole sequence, everything you've just heard, had to be redone, this time just using a tripod. I wonder if I can get a wah, 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 wah sound effect. So there you go. I need to do another trip shortly to see if I've sorted all of these problems or not. And if not, well, I'll certainly let you know. My fingers are crossed, but I'm pretty sure Murphy's Law will come into play, no doubt. And I'm sure there will be more to deal with. You know, the issues I've just described are probably some of the most common ones that you'll come across when you first start filming with your iPhone, and Dashcam if you're stupid enough to want to try that too. And there's bound to be a lot more, but hey, unless you are prepared to get out there and keep doing and redoing something, you'll never get any better at this movie making stuff. And those 14 lessons I've learnt so far, got anything to add to it? Anything that you've learnt? Please add it to the comments so that we can share it with other people. Why not? And if you like this, well, you can like and subscribe, etc., all that crap. And the videos that I have already finished are coming up shortly. So please, have a look at them and see some of the different ideas that I'm trying out. Bye for now.